Hey y'all, new day, new verses as we continue on into chapter 15. Today we're doing verses 21 through 28. Like I said in the comment for Tuesday's video, I wanted to apologize yesterday. I was wanting to do a post and the little residual ows from getting the nerve burn were a little uncomfortable. But it ended up being a really good refill day. So I'm back and ready and happy to keep digging in, because with the faith of a Gentile woman, or a Canaanite woman, I think you'll see exactly the kind of fun that's been running through my mind the last couple of days. Here we go. Then Jesus left Galilee and went north to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman who lived there came to him pleading, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David, for my daughter is possessed by a demon that torments her severely." But Jesus gave her no reply, not even a word. Then his disciples urged him to send her away. "Tell her to go away," she said. "She's bothering us with all of her begging." Then Jesus said to the woman, "I was sent only to help God's lost sheep, the people of Israel." But she came and worshipped him, pleading again, "Help me, Lord." Jesus responded, "It isn't right to take food from the children and throw it to the dogs." She replied, "That's true, Lord. But even dogs are allowed to eat the scraps that fall beneath the master's table." "Dear woman," Jesus said, "your faith is great. Your request is granted." And her daughter was instantly healed. I'd heard that there's always two things going on in verses like this. So it invites you to go dig more into what you're doing. So I just realized the lack of space between more and on can sound weird. And before digging into the fun of it, on a spiritual side, can we just all smile about the fact that Jesus himself just said that it's perfectly fine to give scraps to your dog? So, I'm going to give them slices of cheese every now and again, little bits of it. If I can eat it, why not? Anyway, the fun I wanted to start digging here, because there is so much to unpack in this little section. And admittedly, the first time I ever really ran through it, I didn't quite get it. I saw kind of Jesus being a jerk, if I'm honest, like the first time I read this, before I started getting into relationship with him and letting me see the wisdom that's there. Because left Galilee and went north to the region of Tyre and Sidon. He was already in a pretty northern region, like northern Israel territory to begin with. That's where Galilee is. So he's already not in Jewish country when he's doing this. And now he's going even farther out. An area out that is called to be a place in, I believe it's Isaiah, possibly Jeremiah, where people will start coming and gathering to the God of Israel. And they start following the true God when they see him. And I enjoyed the fact here, the translation says a Gentile woman, but the Greek reads Canaanite. And I like that even more, because the Canaanites were the group of people that ancient Israel was sent to go get rid of, because they were involved in child sacrifices, to say nothing of a lot of the immoral behaviors, the reckless disregard for life. Not exactly a whole lot of pretty going on there. So God said, okay, of all the people that you're going into this land, they're the ones you have to get rid of. Because murdering kids, not okay. And that's way back in Torah. The Deuterocanonical? Yeah, first five. Pentateuch, that's the one. Sorry, I was looking for the expression for it. But yeah, the first 5 books of the Bible. That's where you can go back here and see that the Canaanites were the ones that were supposed to be gotten rid of. These people were considered the enemy of Jacob. And I find it interesting as we go on that a Canaanite woman, who were people originally at war with Israel, is coming running to Israel's God, Israel's Messiah, and saying, "Help me, Lord, Son of David, for my daughter is possessed by a demon that torments her severely." And she goes running to the one source she knows that can help. She's grown up in the area. She's probably heard and grew up on the same stories of the God that parted the Red Sea, and so many different examples of how God has been faithful. Clearly, because she goes running to the one. And Jesus, he doesn't reply to her. Not even a word. And it's one of those, okay, why? Because it does seem a little rude to ignore somebody. I started thinking, well, there's always two things going on here. What if Jesus is trying to see what the disciples will do? Because it's after the disciples say that they're tired of all this Gentile woman's begging, all this hurt and helpless mothers begging. They say, go away, get rid of her, please send her away. That's when Jesus decides to talk to her. And keeping in mind that Jesus had already told his disciples to share the fact that God's kingdom is near. The fact that most of his disciples come from a place of begging, knowing what it is to live off of the kindness and mercy. And more than that, they are people who have had the option of seeing God act so many times. I mean, just before this, not even a little, he was walking on water. And now they're tired of hearing another person's begging. And yeah, it can be a little draining being around that need constantly. But that's where it's an invitation to have God pour into you. Why it's necessary to have times and season when God pours into you. Because if your cup is empty, you have nothing to pour out. If your cup is full, you can have nothing, you can't be poured into. It is that beautiful place where God gives us something that we can pour out and offer others, where he says to do, following that beautiful gift of sharing the love and mercy that we are shown, and then being poured into by him, so that we are always refreshed and moving and growing. That stream of living water. Because it's kind of interesting that still water usually causes death, but moving water is a source of great life. And I think we see that here too, because it's only after the disciples tell Jesus, please tell her to go away. She's bothering us with her begging. Like the homeless people, or the starving, or the demon-possessed, or the many people that were just fed, and another group of people that we're going to be seen fed tomorrow. Where God is acting in such beautiful provision. And he responds to her, I was only sent to help God's lost sheep, the people of Israel. Now he could have said the children of Jacob, but he didn't. He said Israel. And made me start thinking, okay, well, Israel is one who wrestles with God. So, if there's always something going on here, what if he's pointing out the fact that he came to help those who wrestle with God? Who try and dig in with him, grow with him? That he came for those who want that relationship. Because he's pointing it out to her right here. And she's coming and worshiping him anyway, saying, Lord, help me. With absolute trust, with absolute faith, knowing that, yeah, I know by blood my people and your people are sworn enemies and have been trying to kill each other since before David. But you are the son of David, the king of Israel. You are the most high king. Please help me. I know that you are the one who can, so I will hold to you. And Jesus responds with something that almost makes me think about the pearls before swine. And I don't think that it's him seeing her negatively in any way, shape, or form. I think it's him enjoying a bit of mental chess that he's not getting in other places. Because he knows why he's there. He went there for her. He ended up feeding a lot of people later on, and we see a great deal of his actions. But you can read clearly in verse 29, Jesus returned to the Sea of Galilee. He went to her. He knew he was going to help her. So if he knows why he's there, for her, for that belief, to show that kind of love, to show that kind of faith, maybe there's a separate lesson going on here about what it truly, truly, truly looks like to live forward the love we're given. Because he says it isn't right to take food from the children and throw it to the dogs. Well, that very much echoes this idea of a dog returning to its own vomit, or a pearl casting pearls before swine. Because we know he enjoys speaking in parables. And even just simple lines like the parable of it's not what goes into your mouth that defiles you, but what comes out. If that's considered a parable, then perhaps we should start looking at much, much more as parables. Much, much more in an invitation to dig deeper. Because it isn't right to take food from the children and throw it to the dogs. Seems that he instinctively understands the difference between, and well, obviously he would, he's God, know the difference between those who truly chase after the Lord and those who are feckle like the Pharisees. Because right here, when he goes to heal this woman's daughter and show an entire group of people through the centuries how much God loves, he could have been calling out the Pharisees. He could have been standing there doing what Jeremiah did, doing what Isaiah had to, throwing out, but he didn't. He references what they did and then goes to help those who are God's children, his lost children. She responds with a brilliant show of mental prowess. It's like, that's true, Lord. Yeah, the children should eat. They should. And why should the prize dog be well fed when the children are starving? That's a little AFU. But even dogs are allowed to eat the scraps that fall beneath the table. Because if the master has enough bounty, the kids and the dogs are going to be well fed and pampered. And she's running to the Lord of all provision, the Lord who makes manna rain from heaven, the Lord and God who parts the sea so that an army's worth of people could march through on dry land. He is the God who holds the sun standing still in the sky. Because remember, this is a Canaanite woman. So she grew up on the story of the sun standing still for the people of Israel where they were routing the Canaanites. She grew up on that from the Canaanite side of things. She didn't grow up on the side of, oh, well, our God is able to do everything amazingly and he just held the sun there because he is good and all-powerful. She grew up from the bloodline of people that's going, the sun stood still and we got the crap kicked out of us. We don't know how it works. We don't know how it did. It's just apparently whoever they call God is. Yeah, because we've seen that again and again and again. So yeah, she's coming up on it from that side of things, that culture of it. And she still knows that if God has that kind of bounty for his children, he's going to have it for me too. And the reason I'm leaning this way is because Jesus himself has at least three women that are not Canaanite or not Israel by blood. Tamar, Rahab, and Ruth. None of them are Israel by blood. But they chose to make Israel's God their own and are in form in the bloodline of Jesus. Isn't that beautiful there? Because to me, this seems like mental chess between a woman who knows that God is going to do it and a God who knows he's going to do it, and a couple disciples going, hey, can we get a box of Wheaties? Because that's the kind of faith that's the kind of love we see with this response. Dear woman. So he's talking to this woman who all of his disciples, even he didn't give a word to initially. And he's treating her with now a term of endearment, seeing her faith, saying that her faith is great, calling it out, which is in real big contrast to Peter, who was walking on water, sank in and Jesus said to him, you have little faith. Now granted, this was back when he was Simon, not quite Peter yet. He's still getting there. But he's in the Peter molding process. So I'm not ragging on Peter when I point this out. Not ragging on any of the disciples. We're all in a learning process. I just find it very, very beautiful and very, very funny. The few times we see in the Bible where Jesus talks about great faith, it's a centurion, a Roman military official, and a Canaanite woman. Two people that should be as far from God's grace and are probably as far from his bloodline as you can get. And yet they know where true authority lies. They know where true power lies. They know that in a world like ours, you need to go to someone, something, that being, God, who is real. And if you spent your life around fakeness and falsities, you can easily find real. You can taste it, touch it, smell it. It's different. And God's reality that we're seeing here is very different. Because sinking while walking on water, that's little faith. Being so persistent that you walk out, knock, and the door will be open. Seek, and you shall find. What is it? Yes, seek and you shall find, knock and the door shall be open. I always misremember the third one. But the point is chasing after him in deep and true relationship. Because he's pointing out here by his own responses that it isn't right to take food from the children and throw it to the dogs. What if he's saying that there's a different kind of setup for who the dog is and who the child is? And maybe that's something for only God to truly know, because he's the only one who truly knows the hearts. And if we're taking his judgment seat from him, should probably stop trying to be God. Because remember, we're forgiven based on us forgiving others. Jesus said it himself, back on the Sermon on the Mount. Nothing has changed. The current builds on the past, remember? So he says, "Dear woman, your faith is great, your request is granted." And her daughter was instantly healed. We see that kind of miracle, same with the centurion. That great faith that I'm not going to take no for an answer. I'm going to seek and find. I want what is real. Who is real? And it just makes me smile that it is the God of Israel who is real. Just kind of a fun bit of language there. But think about that. All the way through, he's showing us, his disciples then and his disciples now, that God knows the heart. God knows who truly is in supplication to him. And if we don't know, we need to ask. We need to get right. We need to get into right relationship with him. Because it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. Trials and tribulations come. And we ain't seen nothing yet compared to what can come for what the world throws. Revelation. But we can rejoice. Not because those moments are coming and we enjoy other suffering. Far from it. The exact opposite, in fact. We can rejoice and hold joy knowing that God will set things right. That justice will be seen. So we do live in a world where justice is often corrupted and damaged, falsified. But God's truth, God's justice will always win out. And we see it here with this woman who had deep faith, great faith. Said, I know who is the one who can fix this. I'm going to go to God. Because she wasn't going to stop chasing after the one who could fix it. And neither should we. Dig into him. Dig into the Lord. And remember that even if it may not seem one way, perhaps we just need to ask God to give us a new or clear vision. His eyes, his heart. Kind of makes sense if we're going to be his hands and feet, doesn't it? Now, I will see you guys tomorrow for verses 29 through 31, and possibly into the Jesus feeding thousands 4,000 for 32 through 39. We shall see, because it all comes together to show a great deal of beauty. And I think as we dig more into it, it'll be all the clearer to see that as long as we're chasing after him because we know he can set it right, we're in the right direction. He's the one that takes the lead. I'll see you then. May His favor be upon you. Know that you are loved. And know that He knows your trials. Just keep knocking. You'll see. See you then.